Yes, thank you very much and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Well, in the Netherlands it's good afternoon. I'm not sure if it's account for everybody, but welcome to my presentation. Um, this in this presentation, I will talk about how you can publish, or we are going to publish standards concerning data interchange in the container industry. But before that, I'd like to introduce myself a bit. My name is Roosmalen. I'm one of the founding partners of EAxpertise, a consultancy firm on Sparx Enterprise Architect and related tools. We provide training and we sell licenses. Beside that, I'm a husband, a father, and in the last couple of months, I have been sailing the oceans on a sailing yacht in a sailing race, sailing competition. Um, This is part two of a series of presentations. The last presentation I gave in the Global Summit in 2023. You can see the link to the presentation. So I won't go into the details that I discussed last year. I want to continue from there. And this is part two of a series of presentations. So if you like this, be prepared to receive further sessions as well. For the last couple of years, I've been working for and with DCSA. DCSA is the Digital Container Shipping Association. It's a non-profit independent association which was established in 2019 and is backed by the 9 of the 10 largest container shipping companies. DCSA envisions that they want to help this industry to getting more digitally interconnected. That's good for business goals as well as sustainable goals. I won't talk much about the container industry. I think everybody knows what a container is, although a container in this industry is not called a container, but equipment. What's in a term? And on the left-hand side, you see a graph that shows the amount of containers that are shipped worldwide. And you see that each year it changes a bit. You see effects of Corona and the uptake that we have this year, or the estimated uptake this year. One container, or the containers mentioned in this graph, are 20-foot containers, and 20-foot is basically the smallest size of container that is shipped on an ocean carrier. Within this industry, Maersk is the biggest player and ships around 4 million of those containers each year, and for that it uses 780 ships. So if you want to have any idea about the size of this industry, then I like to point to you that website address at Visual Capitalist. A very informative website. Okay, what does DCSA do? It makes it plays in an environment of container shipping, and that means that many parties like carriers, shippers, terminal operators, agents, customs, insurers, freight banks, and many more people, and many more carriers and many more terminals are have to work together to make digital transformation and information exchange possible. Each carrier, each terminal, and probably each bank and each agent, etc., work in a different way. So it's quite a job to get them on the same page. EDI messages are at the moment very much used, but airmail, courier service, fax, and telex are also still to be used. And for many in the industry, sending a PDF by email is also the way to do digital transformation. To do the job properly, DCSA makes reports, which are also interesting to read. The URL is also on this page. And what you see in this diagram is who are the key stakeholders and their needs concerning digitalization. I won't go into details, but one of the findings is that 51% of all cargo owners say that digitalization can improve fuel efficiency. And that's an interesting finding, because if you know more about when and where to go and you have the right information available, you can save fuel, lots of fuel. What do we do at DCSA exactly? Well, one of the things that we provide are API calls. We provide digital interfaces for various information exchange moments in time for interaction between parties in the shipping industry. So at the moment we have all kinds of APIs available, like for booking, just-in-time track and trace, operational vessel schedules, and IoT events. And the APIs that I'm working on at the moment are commercial schedules and issuance and surrender of bill of lading. And that means that we have to publish information concerning those developed interfaces. What we try to achieve is creating and publishing robust APIs for all the parties involved in the container industry. And that does not only mean that we only have to deal with the ocean carriers, but also with the parties that I've already mentioned. Of course, there are some hurdles to take. There are many parties involved. Some are very individual, some are organized in certain branches. So sometimes we have to talk to individual parties, and sometimes with a bunch of parties organized in an organization, a trade organization, for instance. It's quite a complex business. Shipping the container itself is pretty easy. We know about that, but how to pay, how to own the contents in a container, and also IT vendors playing in this area, they're all making this environment very interesting and, at least to say, a bit complex. So to overcome that hurdle, it's very important that before you start developing an API, you need to find a common ground. That means you have to find the right people in the right organizations. And another hurdle is that you have to compete with competing and overlapping standards. So with that, you have to combine all kinds of knowledge to make it work. The goal of DCSA, or what we try to realize with all those APIs, is that in 2030, 100% of all the bills of lading will be sent electronically. And with electronically, I don't say it should be sent as a PDF in an email, but via the APIs that will be provided. So how does DCSA do that? First, find the right stakeholders, and with those stakeholders, find those areas that are interesting to standardize. Not everything is interesting enough or is valuable enough, so it means that you have to find those exact places where APIs are valid and useful. And then, if you know that, you have to find those stakeholder groups and bring them together and help them, and they have to help you to design and develop the standard. What does that entail? Analysis of business processes to get a better understanding. And when you do that, you will find that there are so many business processes that it's very important to scope that those parts in the interaction between processes that are valid points for interaction and thus for APIs. Since this is a global affair, it's very, very, very important that everybody speaks the same language. So that means that one of the focal points is getting a glossary of terms that is understood by all the parties involved in coming up with the API. Then DCSA is not the only organization in the transportation industry, so we have to align with a lot of existing standards, as I said before. So we have to look at other standards, and we have and then if we have that available, then we can start designing the standard and review them. And the result will be a REST API interface according to the OS 3.1 standard. If that's available, we have to publish it, and that also means some commercial promotion of it, provide test cases, prove conformance to conformance to the API implementation for all the parties that are going to use that API. And if the API is on the market and running, then we still have to support it and probably enhance it in future situations. In my first presentation, so that the presentation was last year, I presented this diagram, and in this diagram I showed which kind of models we are making. And then we had the situation that within DCSA, we didn't make models, but just diagrams, which were not very complete and consistent. So we introduced completeness and consistency and traceability across model and model elements. I also decided that the Sparx repository would become the single source of truth, and that all designers involved, all analysts and designers involved should work according to a way of working. So our environment then was pretty straightforward. I think DCSA was one of the first organizations using the ESR solution, and started to use Prolaborate in the early stage. But for this year, we came up with all kinds of findings that we learned last year, and we said, well, there are some things that we have to improve, and also we have to admit. We had to admit, for instance, that Sparx Enterprise Architect and making a model is not the place where the problem domain and the solution starts. It starts in Miro. We work a lot together with subject matter experts, so we provide all kinds of environments where interaction is possible. So Miro is one of the places that are used for initial ID development and initial publication. We have various other tools to show and present our information. Of course, it's the website itself. We have a lab environment where we document our APIs and provide tools to create your software with. We use, of course, we use Confluence, Swagger, Postman, Stoplight, and I probably have forgotten 10 other tools. So you can imagine that we have to decide where to put what kind of information. Bringing people, we also noted that if you start with a class diagram or a sequence diagram or some difficult process diagram, it's very difficult to get people on the same page. So we came to use conceptual modeling, I will, in this presentation, I will talk more about this because I think it's a very important step that we have taken. And we made very good progress on using conceptual models. But it provides a better understanding, and by using concepts, you have to narrow down the definition of your terms, make it more specific. And logic and conceptual model is about data, processes, and business rules. So what I also found out is that when you use a conceptual model, it becomes much more easy to reuse some stuff that you have already designed, and also give you a good insight in the complexity of the subject area. After modeling, and not only conceptual modeling, but also making other kinds of models, which I will talk about a bit later. We started to use Prolaborate and Confluence for publication and documentation. We also decided that the HTML output that Sparx itself generates is also a very handy output because we want to show our brand on the screen, on the website. So we use HTML for that. And what I also going to demonstrate is how to align with other standards. To achieve that, we had to change our environment a bit. So some people are going, besides using EA SaaS solution, we still use EA Desktop because we have to import a lot of stuff from other sources and send out a lot of stuff to other sources. We integrated the Prolaborate and Confluence to make internal publication easier to achieve. And of course, the general public looks at web pages about our standard. DCSA is not the, as I said, DCSA is not the only party that is creating standards. I've here made an unreadable diagram, but it shows how many parties we are involved with, and I hope I am complete. I'm not sure yet. But parties like the UN, the World Customer Organization, so that's the customs organization worldwide, IMO, the International Maritime Organization. We look close at what IATA is doing, so they are involved in air transportation. But working together with other standardization organizations, your problem will not become simpler per se, because each organization uses its own terms. And sometimes they align, and sometimes you think, okay, this is a totally different meaning for the same word. What's very important in information and exchange is that if you're crossing boundaries, it's very important that you digitally speak the same language. So it's very important to have a look at the defined values for data exchange. This could be, for instance, in the UN EC standard, it's called code lists. But basically, there are reference tables that are well maintained, and if you find that the reference table misses a number of values, for instance, then you can go to the other organization and say, okay, can I have number 23, because we have to add this meaning to the reference data. Since I started in this industry, I was looking for ontology stuff, etc. But especially in the multimodal transport industry, ontology is not very well known. So that's a big hurdle. Another big hurdle is that information, each standardization organization is very good in hiding information. So it's very difficult to find what you're looking for, even on very elaborate websites like those of the UN. Coming back to the reference data, some reference data is shown as a list of integers, some others are shown as a list of strings, sometimes in competing standards, they use different values, so that makes it very, very difficult. So the interchange between standards is, yeah, what should I say? Can be done better. Another nasty thing is that every organization produces documents or websites that look like documents, and for modeling, that's very unhandy, to say the least. With a bit of luck, you can find large XSDs or very tiny JSON schemas. And those are, you have to convert stuff to make it work. And the problem is when they come up with a new release, you have to do some import interesting stuff to make it work again and not losing your traceability. But what you need is you have to prove to other organizations, to all your stakeholders, that you are correct and complete. So you need those standards to refer to. So that's another hurdle that also costs a lot of time, because it's very difficult to find any automated processes here. And worst of all, every organization, every standardization organization comes with an update. That can be also quite a thing. Alignment within our model, we achieve that by using a lot of trace relationships and come up with all kinds of intermediate reference tables. Tables that are standing between the other organization's standard reference and our reference. So what you see here is that looking at, in this case, a logical model, we have defined a number of enums, those green boxes, and those boxes are connected to other reference tables. So on the left-hand side, you see a reference table for our dangerous goods, which is basically a link to a document explaining that. And if you open the document, then you see all kinds of numbers that you have to adhere to in your API. On the other side, the UNAC provides also reference tables like the green boxes here, but also kind of logical data models. And here, with the traces between the logical data models and the green boxes that we have created, you see that we are tracing some attributes to attributes in existing systems and existing standards. So that's how we try to align this thing. That means that basically all the alignment work we have to do in EA, and I'm looking for ways to see if I can automate this, but it's for now it's a very manual, labor-intensive process. The next subject I will talk about is conceptual modeling, and this exercise started by just having a spreadsheet with definitions and terms. I imported them in EA as glossary items, and then I found out, well, glossary items are not really handy to model with. It's not impossible, but they are too abstract. And I found out that in the terms that we have in our industry, there are basically 7 distinguished categories, which I've shown here. You say Archimate, yes, Archimate. I have made a script to color those Archimate model element types in a more pleasant way. And for each argument type, for each term, Archimate term type, I have put some examples in the table on the right-hand side. So if the term is carrier with the definition with it, then I say, okay, this is an Archimate business actor. And a port is a location, so it's an Archimate location, etc., etc. So the concept modeling basically starts with all those well-defined terms and definitions that are available, and you connect them. You first categorize them in those, well, I did in those 7 different categories, and then I connect those terms with verbs. And those verbs you can easily find in the definition of the term. What's important here is that everybody, whatever conceptual modeling you make, that everybody understands the conceptual model, because then you have everybody ready and understandable already on the page. So before you start doing all kinds of other modeling, like sequence diagrams, business processes, etc., use cases, etc., it's very handy to have a conceptual model before you are going to dive into details. Here I have an example of the glossary of terms. So each box that you see on this diagram holds a term and a definition. And when you are modeling like so, then you'll find that sometimes you cannot connect 2 boxes to each other because it needs another box in between. For instance, on the left-hand side, there's a kind of yellow golden box, which holds the name contract of carriage by sea, which is an important term, but is not yet defined in our glossary of terms. So by making concept models, you find or invent new terms. Another thing that will happen with terms is that the definition of term might change over time. So to support that in EA, I have created a small script that creates a new element with the same name and archives the previous element. And that means that, but that means that all the connections to that term are still retained in the new version of it, which is very handy. But also you might need to look back in the history of the glossary terms to see that the value definitions have changed. Another example of a conceptual model is this one. This one is a more document-oriented conceptual model. Here you see a number of stakeholders and a lot of documents or parts of documents that exist in this industry. And by creating this diagram of these kinds of diagrams, you better understand where each kind of document fits in at a higher level. So here in the center, you see a transfer document, and the transfer document is used for a shipment, and it describes what has to happen on each transport leg, for instance. I also related those terms here with the blue terms, and those blue terms come from, in this case, a UNC-FACT definition. So by using concept model is basically you try to order, you try to find the order in a world of case of terms and make those more more easy to understand. So when you talk to people in this industry based on this diagram, then they will help you to improve it or say, yes, it's wrong. It's perfect now. You really got the picture here, or no, this is not correct. Please change that and that and that, and then your model automatically improves. But I also found out using conceptual models that sometimes it's very handy to see if you can find, for instance, a reference table in your model that might fit here and relate to a glossary term. So I'm not afraid to mix all kinds of modeling notations together. And that's the really interesting part of Sparx. Sparx allows you to do so. What I do like and what you need for publication is that you don't have empty boxes. So if people have an interactive environment, and that could be even a simple plain HTML page, when they click on a box, some text should pop up. But because after 2 clicks of not seeing anything in the description, people stop clicking boxes. But what's also very interesting is that it becomes much easier to fill those boxes because in this industry you have all kinds of defined documents, for instance. And if you ask ChatGPT, what is a blank endorsement BL, then you get a very interesting answer that might help you to find new definitions as well. Yeah, and I didn't say that our industry was easy, but here you see a diagram that shows a lot. And how we came to it, I will explain a bit later. But it shows the start of our development of the surrender and the issuance and surrender API for electronic bills of lading, for paper bills of lading, and for the electronic seaway bill. And interesting here is that that information is sent from one party to another party, but has to pass through a platform of multiple solution providers. So here we have the situation that we have to align with the customers of our customer and the solution providers providing the services for our customers. So that's interesting. That's an interesting situation. This diagram is the result of I think 8 hours of duration with the collaboration of 5 different people within the organization. We've done that in various sessions. And what this diagram shows is all the business stakeholders involved. They are on the left-hand side. All the applicable documents, those yellow boxes. And in the center, you see processes and end states. The container industry and possibly and maybe more industries are very event driven. So everything stops until a certain event takes place, and then the process continues. In the gray boxes, you see 3 different flows. On the left-hand side, the electronic bill of lading flow, and on the other side, in the middle, paper flow, and on the right-hand side, the electronic seaway bill flow. And when you sit together and create such a diagram, then you run into all kinds of interesting things. Issues, you don't know everything when you are going to make this diagram. Some people know parts of it, other people know other parts of it. So that's interesting to bring together. You also, when you're modeling, you also come with all kinds of questions. And in this diagram, I also introduce business rules. Interestingly enough, the first talks about this API started 2 years ago, and since a couple of weeks, by making this diagram, we're getting a better understanding of what's happening. So this is a part of the diagram to show you what's inside. So for this, I used concept mapping, concept modeling, but I also use it in other places. If you have to try to understand a REST API, and our REST APIs are basically built on all kinds of terms and definitions, and then it's very easy to find the structure in that API by just using top-level definitions. So what you see on the left-hand side is a visual representation of the API on the right-hand side, which is published on Swagger Hub. And it's easy to make modifications in the diagram on the left-hand side before you're going to make those in the OS specification. But you can also use that kind of diagram to verify if your logical model is looking similar to this. And that's what I've done in this diagram. With a bit of fantasy, you can see that the structure in the left-hand side diagram is similar to the structure in the right-hand side diagram, but the right-hand side diagram is more elaborate. So, and of course, you can use conceptual elements and align them with your logical data model, which I've done here. In this diagram, you see on the left-hand side the UNCECE glossary term location, which I have connected to our conceptual model. And those elements I have connected to the logical data model. And those are again linked to logical data elements from the UNECE standard. Now what you see here is that we might not be complete, for instance, on location type code or facility type code, which is very interesting because our focus right now is on the container industry, shipping with containers. But a container is shipped multimodal, and maybe we're forgetting here some reference data that might be very interesting for multimodal transportation. Then next thing I want to talk about is, okay, how, if you have made those beautiful models and help people getting forward and understanding the problem better and have information models, etc., how do we go from there? Because if you only use models for designing and not for implementing, you're losing part of the power of modeling and documentation. This diagram starts top left corner, collect information for domain of APIs, which I already discussed by bringing together the subject matter experts that really matter, but also the information that you can retrieve from other standards. Within the next step is, okay, what is the scope and the use case of the API we're going to develop? Then we have to brainstorm about process and interactions and events. Most of them are not written down, so you have to do something with that. Then that brainstorm result must be transferred into model elements. Then you can improve and review that model, create in business, in interaction between systems. I found out that sequence diagrams are very interesting to have. And what's very interesting with sequence diagram is that you can try to prototype your system, maybe by just a manual walkthrough to see if it could fit. And then you're going to publish everything you have created. So this roadmap helps you to make use cases and better and understand the scope of the problem domain. You also have to take care of problems like unclear use cases or unclear scope. It's very interesting to brainstorm, but talking to the wrong people is not very helpful. It's also easy to forget about any references, documentation, models, and implementations if you're in this industry. So you have to look around. So that means that you have to spend time in reading other stuff to start doing something. It's very important to complete and review the model before you do prototyping. My advice always is don't start too early with implementation of a solution, but do it after you have gained sufficient knowledge. If you publish an API too early and bring it to the market and it has not finalized yet, then it will change, and changes can be very hard, especially when so many parties are involved. Changing an API definition is not something you're looking forward with all those parties involved and complaining. Then you have to make sure that your model is accessible, so the documentation around the model is accessible. And another thing you have to take care of is that you need to have enough support, effort, and capacity if you have published the API. And if you're lucky, the API starts to fly, and that means that you need more support or provide more support. Yeah, I am Sparx CA all over the place, but I have to admit sometimes there are other tools available that can start by bringing people together in brainstorm sessions. But the diagram on the left-hand side existed for quite some time already. And then I was asked, okay, can you make a state transition diagram out of it? And that led to that big diagram on the right-hand side. It's not really a state transition diagram, but if you look at the blue boxes, then you notice these are states. And I said before, this diagram is very helpful the last couple of weeks. It's a pretty new diagram. And it brought us to the conclusion that we had reduced the risk of bringing this API to the market, though we still have to build it. So when you look in our repository, you'll see these kinds of diagrams. Of course, we have the closed terms, the concept models, which are the starting point of kind of everything we do inside EA, which is pretty new nonetheless, because we also always started with a process model or ERD model, entity relationship diagram. But we decided to go to a different approach. So on the left-hand side, you see all kinds of behavioral models, like process models, BPMN and use cases, state transition models, and sequence models. I don't call them diagrams because, in my opinion, there's a big difference between just drawing a diagram or create a diagram from a model. So that's, for me, that's different. So that's why I call them models. On the right-hand side, next to processes, there is, of course, data. And to not be involved as a model in every change that is made in the API, we come up with logical data models that we can split over the various domains that we support. Gluing them together can be done with business rules models. Business rule applies to data as well as to processes. So I cannot imagine that there's any organization doing behavioral modeling in one tool, information modeling in another tool, and if they do business rule models in a third tool. I think that's a real disaster. To combine all those models together, We make alignment traceability models. And we also make foundation models. And foundation models are those conceptual models that describe part of the situation. For instance, I've made a foundation model of all the documents involved in this industry and connected them together to understand when and why and how they help in this business. Yeah, collaboration then. If you have made such a beautiful model, then you have to share it with other people. So what we do is internally we share it within our design team, which consists of a product owner and a couple of people implementing and making logical data models, etc., etc. And we use Teams for sharing just a diagram within EA and talk to each other. We have a global team, so bringing everybody in the same room at the same time is hard. It's very difficult. And we work in different time zones, so we share information within Teams here. And if we have, say, first usable version of the diagram, we start to review it in Prolaborate. And review means are the names correct? Are the connections correct? And are the description of the various boxes correct? So that's what's going to be reviewed. When you're as a modeler, when you're doing so, you have to explain what you try to express. So why are you using those types of model elements? And when people start start to talk about it and correct your diagram or add something to your diagram, it's very important to listen carefully. Sometimes I make a deliberate mistake in a diagram because that gets people on their feet, and then they are more eager to change your diagram, and that's of course very helpful. In my opinion, there's nothing that beats spending time on a diagram together. A diagram is not made because you made it for yourself, you made it for a group of people. It's also not finalized in a single session, but you need multiple sessions. Part of the diagram I showed you, I discussed with only one person, and with another person said, well, okay, I understand this part, but here my knowledge is not good enough, so you have to ask somebody else. What certainly in an initial state is very important is that make sure that your model is correct and complete. So it's somewhere on the diagram, but it shouldn't be a very beautiful diagram because this is a tool to get you somewhere. So the first stage is in EA itself. The second stage is in Prolaborate. And here you see one of the dashboards that I've created for a certain standard. As you see, diagrams are not that usual, and there's a lot of things still open here. But the idea is that here we bring together the diagrams that we feel are important to explain how the API will be working or is working. Within our repository, we have 3 different project root nodes. And there is a project root node that's called projects that contains all the APIs that are in development but not ready to publish yet. Then we have the DCSA, what we call the DCSA repository, that contains all the published information. So that can be any kind of diagram helping here. And of course, we have a part that is contains our reference models. So what we're going to publish to the, say, general public is only the information in the DCSA repository. The rest we keep for ourselves, and that's for further development. In Prolaborate, we start writing some text because we need text for our website, some initial commercial text, for instance. We need text to be put on a developer's portal, etc., etc. And that's what we start to write in Prolaborate. We also introduced navigation because, as I will explain later, we also export to plain HTML, and plain HTML is nice, but you need navigation for that, otherwise people are clicking in something they really don't understand. If we have that information available, then we are going to use Confluence to finalize the text and prepare for final publication. So what you see here is a Confluence page with a diagram, a real life diagram from EA included via Prolaborate. And then the last step is, okay, now we have to publish for the general public. And we use the generated HTML output of EA, and we have done some changes in the CSS to make it more DCSA-alike. When we publish, we also run a publication script, and the publication script contains the following functionality. We are into GDPR, so we have to change the author of the diagrams and the model elements into DCSA. Every 3 months we publish a new version, so we change the version numbering in all the elements. We freeze the diagram because we don't like to have the situation that while we're modeling in a project's root node or in one of the project's root node, we add a relationship, and then one of the published diagrams are changed. We also unlock all the published elements, packages, and diagrams because published elements, packages, and diagrams are holy to us, so changing them should involve an extra step. We also validate some of the modeling rules that we have came up with. I think, and this is the most interesting part of the presentation, I guess. What we have learned the last couple of years is that it's very, very, very important that you don't wait too long before start making a formal model. When I came to DCSA, EA was used for making diagrams that were included in Word documents. And yeah, I call it after the fact modeling, and that's not very useful because when you model before in an earlier stage, you can already find problems and come up with solutions before even writing the first sentence for your documentation. Also, if you have a good model, then the implementation is just there to prove that your model is correct, which is also a very interesting thought. Don't try to use each model language construct to its full max. BPMN is very large, has a huge number of model language constructs, and we decided to only use 3 or 4 of them because nobody else will understand it. Our public is not BPMN analysts, so we have to talk with less sophisticated models and model types. One thing that is quite annoying, what I learned, is that if you have a use case actor, say the use case actor carrier, and you are going to use the carrier, that actor in a BPMN, then it's shown as a lane. And when you make an Archimate diagram, it's shown as a business actor. But it means in EA that uh, you have to maintain three different element types. It would be very handy to not have that. Another thing that very little people seem to know is that if you create a sequence diagram and you look at the toolbox, you can use those elements in the toolbox. But actually, you can use almost any other modeling element type in a sequence diagram. So what I use are the Archimate types. And I found out that if you connect them and you draw a sequence, they will appear as operands. So have you ever seen an Archimate element with operands? Yes, yeah, you can. What I also learned is that if you work together to create a model, then 1 + 1 is more than 3. It's incredible how much information you can get from people that are not familiar with modeling, but they know a lot. Drill down to navigation is very important. So if you are going to publish a model, spend time on navigation, because you cannot have all the people, all your customers going through all the diagrams that you have created. Don't be afraid to show what you don't know. So in my diagrams, you saw those issue and change elements because I don't know. I'm modeling and I start to insert those types because it's very helpful and helps other people as well. And you see that a model is not complete yet. What I also found out is that the wrong model is better than no diagram at all. So find out what's right and what's wrong. And some models are as good as can be, but still better than being perfect. Diagrams are useful, but maintaining hundreds of diagrams is not very interesting. So don't forget that the value of your model is in the database and not on the diagrams per se. Creating a model is a kind of art, but it's not artwork. And each diagram that you make serves a certain goal to tell something or some part of the model. So don't make it over complete and focus on what you want to tell in that certain diagram. Then a couple of tips. These are the things I really like. These are my best friends in EA and Prolaborate. Insert related elements. As you can imagine, the more information you have in your model, the more information you can retrieve from it. And so it becomes easier to create a temporary diagram. Model queries in Prolaborate are very handy. Here you see a very simple query that shows that for this standard, we still have a number of issues outstanding. So the logical data model, for instance, is not finalized yet. Working on various projects in the same time, well, parallel to each other. Working sets are very, very easy. And layers are also very interesting to show certain information in a diagram and hide information if it's too complex. And one of my favorite scripts is because I haven't found time to create a meta model or an MDG. I have a simple script that colorizes the elements. So by having those colors, it's easier to read the diagrams and understand the diagrams. Well, this is my talk for now. If you want to get involved in the work that DCSA does, find my product owner, Gerard Meijer, or myself at DCSA. And if you have questions concerning EA, then please contact me via my EAxpertise email address. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was a valuable presentation.
Han, thank you for your insightful and extensive presentation on publishing standards with EA. Audience, I hope you found the information helpful and eager to implement them in your own projects. Audience, you can still post your questions at Slack, where Han and the team will be available to answer your questions. To all attendees, more sessions are scheduled next. Kindly stay tuned, and we thank you for your time once again.